employment roles in those years went up significantly.
Yes, it did. How did the situation for CUNY change? Like, when did it start to get better? What actions of the government or anything? What
Well,
contributed?
one of the significant actions that the MAC Corporation did was to transfer responsibility for the senior colleges from the city to the state. We now were, after in the fall of 1976, we were now a state agency instead of a city agency. The city kept the community colleges, but passed the responsibility, the funding responsibility, onto the state. So there were major steps that had to be taken by the state to absorb what was, after all, a large university system. It already had the SUNY system, but now it also absorbed the CUNY system. And this was a major commitment, budgetary commitment by the state. So after that, we were subject to state regulations. We were subject to the various audits, reviews, legislative actions that the state has passed for higher education. We were reporting and had to have our approval for our courses from the state education department. We were suddenly in a different world. And the state, also being in those years not particularly prosperous, kept us on a very short leash. And I remember in my years when I was department chairman in the early 1980s, and then when I joined the office of the provost in the mid-80s, that we hardly did any hiring of faculty. When we started, by 1980, we still had a faculty, and here the figures are not exact, but they're rough. We still had a faculty of maybe about 850. By 1990, we dropped to 500 faculty. Wow. At the same time as the student body increased again. The student body gradually increased during the 1980s, but the faculty kept declining because we didn't hire, we didn't replace.
Why not?
No money. No money. So those are very lean years. The consequences of that for a place like Brooklyn College, but also at other peer colleges, was that when we began again to hire faculty, which was in the late 1990s, we had senior faculty, advanced in years, and we had young faculty. We were missing a whole generation. And that one of the major consequences for Brooklyn College was the absence of a whole generation of faculty members who would have assumed leadership positions in the college, who would have played major roles as college-wide committee chairs, who would have played major roles in the leadership of faculty council, who would have been department chairs. We didn't have them. So it was either relying on senior faculty, people in their 50s and 60s, or on very young people that we had hired. So that is a consequence that has been one of my targets over these last 10 years in order to fill in that missing group. But it is really a significant legacy of those years between 1980 and about 1996, 97, when Brooklyn College could not employ anybody except very large, small numbers. Last year, for example, we hired 41 faculty members. In 1983, 84, when I was provost, we had a good year when we hired 4. So that's the difference. And it wasn't until I became president that we really moved forward in making major replacements as people begin to retire and adding to the faculty because we were being better funded. And we did budgetary changes. There was one other consequence that played a role. One of the reasons that has often been given for the financial crisis, one of many, was that the university in 1969, 1970 went to open admissions. What that meant for Brooklyn College was that it would take in, enroll, anybody, excuse me, anybody who was in the top third of their class, senior class. You all know that there are schools in which that means something, and there are schools in which it doesn't mean anything. So you had a very broad range of talent, from very strong students to weak students. With the abolition of open admissions, that broad range from the very good to the weak narrowed. There were fewer. And so ever since then, we have begun gradually, slowly, and in the recent years more with greater, when we speeded up the pace with greater acceleration, we gradually regained the quality that we had. So not only do you lose students, but you also change the quality of the students when you become smaller again. The one other thing that you should know, which is something that I encountered myself repeatedly, was that the students who graduated from Brooklyn College, the alumni, who graduated before open admissions, before 1970, say, deeply resented open admissions. They understood it, not for what it was, they understood it as a system that admitted all comers, regardless, and they therefore said, this devalues our degree. Our degree is no longer worth anything because you're giving it away. And they deeply resented it. When I became president 10 years ago, I would visit alumni in Seattle or San Diego or Atlanta or wherever, and they really lit into me and said, how dare you destroy our reputation, the value of our degree, we're not proud of this, we hate this place, it's done us no favors. I like those questions. I like that question because then I could talk about Brooklyn College today, which was so different. They hadn't caught up with the fact that open admissions ended in 1976. And so the memory of that reputation, bad reputation, extended for years afterwards. And one of the lessons that I saw, again, validated by this experience, is that it's very easy to lose your reputation. And it's very hard to regain it, very hard to regain it. It's taken us decades to regain a reputation that we lost in 6 short years. So there are consequences for the students, there were consequences for the faculty, there were consequences for the alumni. One of the things that happened in those 4 years after open admission ended and the city went bankrupt was that we began to contract. The schools that were in downtown were abandoned. This place, the college, began to tear down all the temporary huts that it put up. You know where those wooden stairs are, the sitting area in front of Whitehead?
Yeah.
If you were to take that away, you would find underneath it sort of large rectangular concrete footings. That's where buildings were.
Really?
Yes. And it was so expensive to remove that we decided to disguise it by making this an outdoor seating area. But underneath it, you will find the memories of 1976, when we had temporary buildings sitting there. And much of that had to deal with students who needed help with writing, who needed help with reading, who needed help with math. And when we no longer had those students, we tried to sell those buildings. Nobody wanted those buildings. So we said to somebody, if you take the buildings, we'll give it to you. And so they came and they took it down, and then they could not jackhammer up the concrete. It was just so solid. So there we sat with these huge rectangular concrete blocks in front of Whitehead. And then the art department, the students in the art department decided that they would offer the suggestion